The stalking warrior paused, 1 foot 6 inches above the ground. In his right hand was a lance with a razor-sharp blade. 20 yards in front of him, a man was sitting against a tree, dozing in the sun. A bee landed on the warrior's ear. He paid it no attention, his eyes focused totally on the figure in front of him. After a minute, a little breeze blew through the trees, rustling the leaves, and he took that opportunity to take 2 quick steps forward in the grass, feet feeling for any stick that might betray his presence. His eyes were narrowed on the figure in front of him, who was sleeping against the tree. The man against the tree had black hair shot with gray, and a red headband. He was wearing a white cotton blouse with sleeves to the elbows and cotton pants, white cotton pants to about his knees. His feet were in sandals. As he dozed in the warm afternoon, the warrior slid his feet forward another step. He was 36 inches away from the sleeping man. One more step, and his lance would be at the man's throat. He raised his foot, ready to move that last step closer, when all of a sudden a soft voice interrupted the stillness. Haven't I warned you, son, that man is the hardest animal to stalk? The warrior, with his foot raised in the ground, raised both arms and collapsed backward into the grass, roaring with laughter. Grandfather, I had you. I thought I had you. I've never been able to stalk you successfully, but I had you this time. The old man turned around and smiled and said, You've been trying to sneak up on me since you were 3 years old. I let you do it one time when you were 5 just to encourage you, but never again. The warrior climbed to his feet and he said, You're the only one in the whole village that I can't sneak up on. All of my friends, they get distracted with other things, and it's easy to sneak up on them. I just can't do it with you. Azul looked at his grandson, Cuto, and said, Well, keep trying, son. Keep trying. You never know when you're going to need these skills. And Cuto said, We don't need these skills here. We've been in this village forever. I was born in this village. The only thing you tell us we have to worry about is the conquistadors, but they're so clumsy. If they ever show up, we'll be warned well in advance. I know, said Agil. But you never know when you might need these skills. Now, let's go off into the hills and see if we can get a rabbit or a quail or something for supper. Cuto leaned the spear up against the tree, and both of them unwrapped long slings from around their waist and headed for the hills. That night, over supper, which was, they hadn't found any rabbits or quail, but Azul had killed a small deer with his sling. They had roasted venison in the little house that Ita and Adzul shared with Cuto. Cuto's mother and father had died from disease when he was just a young boy. Um, his his older brother, had been killed by a jaguar trying to protect his dog, and his sister had gone off with a traveling trader, and nobody had seen her for years. So, um, over supper, Cuto made an announcement. He and Ria were planning to be married. Ita was really excited, and Adzul gave a big smile. Ita said, "Oh, it doesn't surprise me. The two of you have been like a pair of doves in each other's presence for the last 2 years. You can't do anything. One can't do anything without the other." And Adzul said, "Well, we're going to have to build a house for you guys when you get married because you can't stay with us. You got to have your own house." And at that point, Cuto made his second announcement. "We're not going to be staying after the wedding." He said, "We're heading north to the community the traders call Santa Fe. Conquistadors are up there, and we think we might be able to supply them with food the way you supply all the old people in this village with food we hunt in the hills. We might be able to supply the conquistadors with food and make a new life there." And Adzul said, "Aren't you satisfied here?" And Cuto said, "Well, farming is okay, and we have a safe life here, but I'd really like a life of adventure the way you had when you were a young man my age 60 years ago." And Adzul said, "Well, not all of those adventures were entirely pleasant. And Cuto said, "Yeah, but I can't be a farmer forever." And so plans were made for Cuto and Ria to be married. Um, a few nights before the wedding, Adzul, again over supper, said to Cuto, "Well, I think the time has come for you to have this." And he reached in his cotton shirt and pulled out a leather strap to which was tied a silver medallion about 4 inches across with a square hole in the middle of it. And he said, "My father gave this to me when he was dying, as you may remember. And he told me it possesses a great secret and it has to be protected and kept in our family until the secret is discovered. You are to wear this for your life, and when you are old as I am, you give it to the youngest living member of your family. And that person is to wear it for their lives and pass it on until the secret is discovered. Now, the medallion will help you in times of trouble. It is never to leave your body. It's never to be taken away from your body." And Cuto said, "Well, I knew my great grandfather had given it to you in that battle, but I didn't know about the secret, and I didn't know about the medallion giving protection." And Adzul said, "Well, let's hope you don't need it, but it will give you help in time of danger." Now, the other two conditions that my father gave until the secret is discovered is that every member of the wearer's family, the medallion wearer's family, needs to learn how to use the sling and needs to learn how to make the armor shirt. Now, you have been using the sling since you were a boy, and I know that you've taught Rhea how to use the sling. Your grandmother and I have taught you how to weave the armor shirt, but Rhea needs to learn that. And Adzul said, I will begin that. Cuto said, I will begin that immediately. So the next day, he and Ita and Rhea gathered some wool, some sheep's wool, and started weaving the armor shirt. And it was a thin, sleeveless shirt, kind of like a vest. And Ita, of course, knew how to weave it. And she and Rhea laughed a bit because Ita said, we can do this quicker. Cuto knows how to do it, but his fingers are a little thick to weave quickly. And so the two women worked on it for about a week. And they finished it, and it was very light and very thin, and like a vest, and it was fitted just for Rhea. And Rhea said, this is beautiful. And Cuto said, well, let's get your atlatl and a spear, and let's test it. And Rhea said, I don't want to damage this cloth. It's beautiful. And Ita and Cuto looked at each other and said, don't worry. And the atlatl is a throwing stick for a short spear. And Rhea had been using the atlatl for a number of years, well trained in it, and Cuto had trained her with the sling. So she was quite skilled with the atlatl. So she got a spear, which is shorter than a spear thrown by hand, and the atlatl is a throwing stick. And the spear fits in the notch at the end of the atlatl, which is a long stick, and using the leverage of the atlatl, the spear could be thrown very, very hard. So Ita and Cuto set up the shirt on a tree about 20 yards away, and Rhea got her spear and atlatl, and she said, are you sure this is okay? And they said, yep. And so she threw the spear with the atlatl, and it hit the shirt hanging against the tree trunk and dropped to the ground. Rhea ran forward and looked at the shirt, and there were just a couple of threads slightly moved, and the shirt was perfect. And she turned around and looked at Ita and Cuto, and she said, that spear would have gone halfway through a deer. And they said, we know, but you had to learn how to weave it, because that's part of a family member to the wearer of the medallion. So about a few days later, they had the Aztec wedding ceremony, in which Cuto and Rhea sat in the doorway on a blanket in the doorway of Adzul and Ida's house, which they were given for temporary use until they left for Santa Fe. They sat on a blanket, and in front of them was a blouse for Rhea and a cotton shirt for Cuto. And Rhea's mother came in the Aztec tradition and tied the sleeves. Rhea was sitting to Cuto's left, and she tied the sleeves of the shirt together, and that was the wedding ceremony. And when she tied the sleeves of the shirts together, everybody cheered, and there was a big celebration. Towards the end of the evening, Adzul handed Cuto a leather sack, a beautiful leather sack. And he said, "This is a wedding present for you um, that we wanted you to have." And Cuto looked at the sack, and Rhea took it and said, "What is this sewing?" And she looked and sewed into the outside of the leather sack with thread, with purple thread, was the figure of a jaguar. And Cuto said, "Well, what's in here?" And Agile said, "Well, take it out." So he pulled the straps holding the neck of the sack closed, loose, and he pulled out the head skin of a jaguar, the preserved head skin of a jaguar. And he said, "What is this?" And Agile said, "It's a mask. Put it on over your head." And Cuto did, and the head skin came over his head perfectly and all the way down to his chest. The eye holes fit his eyes perfectly. The ears had been sewed flat so they looked the way a jaguar charging would look, with its ears flat on its head. The mouth had been preserved and it had been sewn shut, but preserved in sort of a grimace. And the nose was just perfect. And all the people in the village looked at it, and one of the women said, "If I didn't know that was Cuto, I'd think that was the head of a jaguar and the body of a man." And they were all astounded, and Agile said, "Ita made this for me from the second jaguar that attacked uh, after I was badly wounded by the first jaguar when we met. And she saved my life a second time, and she made this mask out of the head skin of the second jaguar. I've never had to use it, never had occasion to use it, but you never know. Take it with you. Sometime you may have occasion to use it." And so Cuto put the head skin back in the beautiful, beautiful leather sack, and Rhea tucked it away with their belongings. 3 weeks later, they set out for Santa Fe. Now, they had 5 of Cuto's childhood friends, now all 20-year-old men, going with them, who wanted to have an adventure. The 5 didn't know whether they'd stay in Santa Fe or come home, but they wanted at least to go with Cuto and Rhea and accompany them to Santa Fe and see what was up there. So they set out with some donkeys loaded with their belongings, and they walked for several days across the high prairie until they came to a really well marked path running north and south. And every 70 yards or so there was a pile of rocks at the edge of the path. And Cuto said, "This must be the trader's path that Agile and Ita traveled on to come to their home, and that Agile had found coming out of the mountains of the Inca Empire and followed until he met Ita at the old temple." And he said it goes on north, and the traders use it all up and down the trail to trade with people and exchange goods. So they set out. About 3 weeks later, they got up, and by then they were traveling in the morning and the evening. There was they'd stopped just about at a day's travel. There was a stream, usually a stream. There was plenty of grass along the path for their donkeys, but about a day's travel, they'd usually find a stream. And but as the weather got hot, they started traveling in the early morning and into the evening. And it was about 3 weeks later that they saw up ahead, about a mile, mile and a half ahead, a thin column of smoke going up into the air. And between them and the smoke was a low hill, a hill hiding whatever was behind the smoke. And Edith said, maybe it's a trader's camp. She was excited about the idea of doing some trading. And they got to the top of the hill, and Agil felt the medallion get hot on his chest. And that is the end of episode 1.